So Strauss, take us back. What first brought you to the world of video gaming?
Well, that goes back a long time. I was president of a movie studio, 20th Century Fox. I'd been there for some time, and I spent 7 years in the movie business. I'd overseen 155 movies, and it became clear that this was a mature business. Fun, but mature. And I remember saying to myself, I really want as a business that is the movie business, but in 1927, the heyday of its business. And I sort of looked around and said, what would that be? And it occurred to me that was the video game business. And then coincidentally, I was recruited to join a startup in the video game space. So you're looking at the only person who's voluntarily left the job of president of 20th Century Fox to go to a raw startup in Silicon Valley, which I did in 1993.
So 1993 was a while ago.
It was.
How mature is the business now?
It's much more mature, and the hallmarks of a mature entertainment business are generally the same. You see consolidation, you see the big get bigger, you see capital go towards those big companies, and it becomes a top 10 or 20 business at any given time. Those hallmarks do exist already. The growth case, though, is a reflection of the fact that our average player is still 37 or 38 years old. And you engage with the same entertainment that you fell in love with at the age of 17 for the rest of your life. You don't stop engaging with it. So as that average player turns 39, he or she doesn't stop playing. They keep playing, and more people enter the cohort, of course. So mathematically, we should expect growth in this business for some time to come.
How fast is the overall business growing?
It's growing more rapidly than any other part of the audio-visual entertainment business, but it's not a huge growth rate now. I would say if you combine console and mobile together, probably around 4 or 5% a year at this rate. So it was growing rapidly, obviously, through the pandemic. It pulled back in 22. Mobile actually had a down year. It's now returned to growth, but slower growth than pre-pandemic.
When you were first involved in 1993, how global was the business?
It was a global business, but a fraction of the size that it is today. Today, interactive entertainment's a $180 billion market, so it's bigger than music, motion pictures, and television put together.
And how much of that's outside the United States, how much inside?
It skews somewhat more heavily outside of the United States, but if you look at companies like Take-Two, we still skew toward the US and Western Europe. Asia's a massive business, sort of centered in China, and companies like Tencent are huge participants in that market. We participate there as well, but we're quite small.
You mentioned mobile. Break down the segments in the business overall.
Well, really, the big rubric is mobile versus console and PC. So think of console and PC as a big cinematic experience that you engage in for many hours. Think of mobile as a small, sort of bite-sized experience, and a mobile player will engage with a game they love 7, 10, 15 times a day for 5 to 10 minutes each time.
So talk to us about Take-Two and its place within this video game world. You have both mobile and console. How big are those relative to each other for Take-Two?
About 50-50. And our goal on the mobile side is to have the #1 market share in mobile. We're not there yet. We're heading in that direction. On the console and PC side, we're one of the leading players. And taken as a whole, depending on the day, by market cap, we're somewhere between #2 and #3 in terms of pure play interactive entertainment companies worldwide.
So as you suggested, mobile versus console goes up and down, it fluctuates. Is there a long-term trend toward one and away from the other?
Mobile's growing a bit more rapidly than console, and that's, I think, because it speaks to a broader demographic. So mobile tends to skew a bit older, tends to skew more female. Console tends to skew a bit younger, not very young, but sort of 18 to 34, whereas mobile can be 34 plus. And console does skew a bit more male.
What about geographically? Is there a skew of mobile versus console geographically around the world?
No, not really. It's a broad-based worldwide business. Now, of course, in developing economies, mobile's much more important as a device, and there wouldn't be, for example, there aren't that many consoles in Africa or India. Those are mobile markets. But there's also very, very small markets for us.
What's the revenue stream look like? How do you get your money?
Well, in the mobile business, essentially mobile's free to play, and we monetize through advertising and in-app purchases. And somewhere between 3 and 20% of the users will pay for in-app purchases, so the rest do not. And advertising is obviously broadly distributed, but on a targeted basis. In the case of console and PC, there's a free-to-play business, but that is largely a business where you purchase a unit, and then you often have the opportunity to engage in an ongoing basis after the original purchase through a multiplayer, for example, experience, and that would be also monetized in-game.
So on the console side, you can continue to pay various enhancements over time.
Yeah, but let's focus on what really matters, which is you can continue to enjoy the experience, you can continue to engage. And what we find so exciting about that ongoing engagement today is that once upon a time, the interactive entertainment business looked like the movie business, one and done. You go out to the market after an enormous creative effort and hope for the best. Today, hit experiences, obviously hit experiences, no one wants more of something if it's not a hit, but hit experiences can become what we call live services. They really are alive. So Grand Theft Auto Online has been around for 12 years, and it continues to engage and captivate audiences, and it's bigger than ever, depending on the day. GTA Plus is up 10% year over year. So on the one hand, Grand Theft Auto 5 has sold in on 210 million units, which is extraordinary. On the other hand, the online experience is a living, breathing, daily experience for millions of people.
So the online experience extended the life, essentially, of these games, because you can play a new game with people around the world.
Greatly, yes, and it's highly social, it's highly engaging, and Rockstar Games, in the case of Grand Theft Auto Online, continues to deliver new content regularly, which keeps audiences excited and engaged.
So you mentioned Grand Theft Auto. We have to talk about that when you talk about the large cinematic experience on a console. Give us a sense of Grand Theft Auto 5 versus 6. It's been 12 years now. Seems like a long time. Why does it take that long to come up with 6?
Well, there are really two reasons. The first is we set an intention, actually, to rest our intellectual property. So some of our competitors come to market very regularly, maybe even annually, with their titles. We only annualize our sports entertainment titles. For our non-sports titles, we think you need to create enormous anticipation on the one hand. And of course, on the other hand, it takes a long time to develop these big, robust experiences. Rockstar Games seeks perfection in what they do. And the perfection's a pretty high bar. It takes a long time. And the reflection of that approach is in the success of Grand Theft Auto 5, which has actually excelled in 3 console generations, which is extraordinary. And today, it's still the standard bearer for the industry, even though it was launched so many years ago. And that's kind of astonishing in a business where the technology is continuing to change at a pretty steep rate. So think of the high bar that creates, for us, of course, but much more so for the consumer.
Take us into the development process. What goes into that process? Who's doing the developing? Where are they? What actually goes into it?
Well, it depends on the team. We have team sizes that are as small as 20 people in the mobile space and as large as thousands of people in the console space. And our studios are all over the world. They're greatly distributed. We have a big presence in the state of California. We have presence in Toronto. We're all over Europe. We have a massive presence in Edinburgh, where we have a lot of people in Turkey, of all places, and in China, India, so we're all over the world. You need to be where the talent is. And you can't just centralize because you'll run out of talent in that location.
How do you find talent in Turkey or in China, or for that matter, in the United States?
Well, we have HR teams that are in the business of recruiting the most talented people. We do generally like to be around universities because the people who can work in the interactive entertainment business are typically highly educated. I mean, they need to know how to program, they need to know how to create art inside a computer environment. That does require an educational background.
When you talk about thousands of people, are those employees? Do you have any independent contractors or freelancers?
They're largely on our payroll. They're largely our colleagues. We do have some outside contractors. The bulk of the work is done by people who actually work inside the enterprise. And that's a reflection of what was the studio system. It's one of the reasons that the economics of this business continue to make sense. Now, one of the dividing lines for a good entertainment business versus a not so good entertainment business is whether the studio system still exists.
So what happened in the United States? Go back to the 1920s. You want to replicate
1927.
1927. So what happened to
Maybe
the film business?
1924.
What happened?
Get a little more runway before 1929.
But what happened in the film business that's different from the video game business?
Well, the studio system went away, and there are a couple reasons for that. But basically, the business really materially changed in the mid-50s, so before we were born, long ago. And that was when there was a consent decree in 1955 that disaggregated cinema distribution from production, on the one hand, and the advent and growth of network television on the other hand. And finally, the desire of certain creators to become independent of the major studios and the studios' willingness to work with those independent creators. And the biggest, most important, and threshold example of that was Desilu, Lucille Ball and Des Yarnaz's studio, which created not just I Love Lucy, but other hits as well, and really demonstrated to creators that if you're good enough and powerful enough in the system, you can ultimately own your own intellectual property. That broke apart the studio system, and suddenly now you're working with independent contractors who are creative, who basically can be made available to anyone who has the financial resources and the marketing and distribution resources to support their activities. That doesn't exist in the interactive entertainment business. We own our intellectual property, and our teams are gainfully employed, happily employed, and kept busy inside the four walls of our enterprise.
So that means that you participate in the upside with a hit, which is good, which is much more difficult in film and TV these days.
Well, film and TV, it's got an element of sort of, heads I win, tails you lose as a big company, which is to say, in success, the creative teams quite properly are able to extract a lot of the economic rents. So we're having that kind of conversation. But in failure, the financing entity bears the entire cost. We share with our colleagues, and we incentivize them highly, and we're very proud of the way that we work together. But we are aligned, which is to say, in success, we all do well. In failure, we don't do very well.
At the same time, it does increase the expense for you. I mean,
the fixed expense.
The fixed expense, exactly right. I mean, when you're spending 12 years developing something, that's a lot of investment, presumably.
It is, and luckily we have the balance sheet for it. It's one of the benefits of getting big. It's one of the pressures of the business. It's one of the reasons that's, standing up a company in a garage today will be awfully difficult. So in a way, the incremental costs have enhanced the barriers to entry to benefit companies like ours.
Are there things that you can do to get an indication of whether it's a hit in advance? I mean, in the film business, as I understand it, for example, you'll have focus groups. So before the studio actually launches the film, they have some sense of where it's going. Do you have that for Grand Theft Auto 6, for example?
Yes, very much so. And now this wouldn't necessarily be true for a big console release, but for many releases, we can actually go out into the market and test actively. We do so in the mobile space, where you'll go to 6 or 7 different countries, not your biggest markets, not the US, and you will test the products well before you launch them. And on the console side, we can do a lot of testing as well, and we do. We have consumers come in and play the games along the way and give us feedback. You're right, in the movie business, there is testing, but what do you test? You can't really test before you have a rough cut. To have a rough cut, you've shot the entire thing. And that's why there are more reshoots today than ever before, but reshoots are really expensive. And also, if you're in reshoot land, often, my experience has been, having overseen a lot of movies, you're already in trouble if you're in reshoot land.
When you think about launching a console, there are trailers that are released. For example, there are, as I understand, for Grand Theft Auto 6. Does the popularity...
There's been one trailer so far, yeah.
But does the popularity of the trailer indicate how the game's going to do?
Well, sorta, which is to say, if no one paid any attention to the trailer, that'd be a bad sign. But there's no guarantee that you could put out a great trailer and still not have a successful release. In the same way you would have that with, marketing any property.
Whether it's in cinema or whether it's in video games, it's ultimately the creative talent that drives the business. How do you lock up the creative talent? Is there a lot of competition for that creative talent? Are you at risk of losing some of it?
Look, probably the thing that I think our teams do best would be attracting, retaining, and motivating our creative teams. And one of the things I'm probably most proud of in my career, given that I don't really have any creative talent at all myself, is that I seem to have some ability to figure out who's really talented and somehow convince them to work within our system, and then most importantly, then to pursue their passions, their genuine creative passions. And that's how hits are created. So we create a culture where talent is enormously valued. And then we have a rational system, so we're not bugging them any more than necessary, and we encourage them to do their work. And then we provide essentially unlimited financial resources to create perfection. And everyone's, going in that direction. And then we compensate people appropriately. We share. So in success, we share. But the goal is to align all incentives. The incentives of our shareholders should be aligned with the incentives of our colleagues. We all should be pulling in the same direction.
As in cinema, it's a hit-driven business. What is a hit? I mean, what numbers do you look at? What metrics do you look at? As you're looking, for example, toward GTA 6, I mean, what kind of range sort of makes it a hit for you?
Well, you would look at unit sales for something like GTA 6 or NBA 2K or Borderlands or Civilization, and you would look at the sales of the last iteration, or in the case of new intellectual property, you'd sort of get a sense of what you think that thing looks like and compare it to other similar releases. And on the mobile side, you would be looking at ultimately you'd be looking at your revenue and your profitability to get a sense of what a hit is.
When I listen to you, you have something of a portfolio with the mobile and the annual sports franchises that get renewed every year, and then the big console releases. Is that the way you view it? Are you sort of hedging? You can sort of hedge by not having all your eggs in one of those baskets?
Absolutely. When we took over Take-Two in 2007, the company had one huge hit in the Grand Theft Auto series, one tiny hit in the NBA 2K series, and that was about it. And so in addition to fixing the problems that we inherited, including meaningful compliance problems, our job was to diversify the product line and actually create more hits on the one hand, and on the other hand, to create a catalog that would generate income on an ongoing basis. And I said, in the very beginning, I said, look, our goal is to be in a position where when we open up the doors on January 1st, we're a profitable business, and then the hits, are on top of that. And that's basically what we've been able to do. So today, we're actually much more diverse than I originally had anticipated and hoped, in that we have a mobile business, which is a live services business. We have these forever franchises. Many of them continually create revenue and profits. We have our frontline console and PC releases that hopefully are profitable and big. They aren't always, of course. We have our catalog, which is the stuff we released in the past. And then we have the live services on the console side, which essentially is catalog as well. But I'm dividing between, say, Grand Theft Auto Online and ongoing sales of Grand Theft Auto 5, one being live services, the other being catalog. Well, you add that all together, and the business becomes much more reliable. You can look at the business and say, this is an ongoing business. It is not as much a hit-driven business, although, of course, in the fullness of time, we rely upon hits and new hits, new intellectual properties.
How sensitive is your business to consumer sentiment? If consumers start spending less, does it affect your business overall, or some parts of your business more than others?
I wish I could say that we were counter-cyclical. There are people who believe the entertainment business is, that old chestnut of, times are tough, so entertainment's not expensive, and I'll soothe myself when I'm unhappy with the economy by consuming more entertainment. It's not really the case. We are pretty well correlated with the economy. So in tough economic times, we will also be hurt. It is not true, for example, that in the Great Depression, the movie studios did fine. In fact, nearly all of them went bankrupt. But no, we're subject to the economy for all the reasons you'd expect. If consumers have less money to spend, they'll spend less on entertainment too. Arguably, we could be disproportionately hurt, although we do not seem to be. And sometimes we can be we wouldn't be counter-cyclical, but sometimes we don't track the economy so closely because, for example, to consume a mobile experience, it's free. You can enjoy the experience without paying anything. And if you do pay, these are can be quite small numbers. These are not big expenditures.
Is it a good business? And if so, how good a business is it? I mean, there was a time that I knew television some. And
I think you still do.
an owned station in a major market was a great business. I mean, there were margins of 50% or even more in the really big. On the other hand, the network business was a terrible business. You know, it was a lot of money, but you were talking 4 or 5% margins. How good a business is video game?
It's a good business. A well-run interactive entertainment company would have an operating margin in sort of the 20 to 30% range. And one of the things that makes it good is that a well-run interactive entertainment company can have very high hit ratios in console and PC, sort of hit ratios in the sort of 70 to 80% range, if not more, versus, say, a well-run motion picture company where your frontline hit ratio on a good day is 30, 35%, which is to say more than half of what you do flops. So it is a very good business as entertainment businesses go, and certainly the return on equities, at the risk of selling our own book here, has been excellent at this company, really excellent.
You're a consumer business. You're selling to consumers. How do you get a sense of what the consumer wants? I mean, take Grand Theft Auto 6, for example, very big launch. How do you get a sense of what the consumer's after?
It's such a great question, and it's a complicated question because, of course, the development starts so far in advance of when the launch is going to occur. And I think it's one of the things that our creative teams do so well, which is they have a sense of where this property needs to be at a point in the future. They have a vision for that. And with regard to a new intellectual property, it's maybe even more complicated. But of course, done the right way, what drives our business is the creative passion of extraordinary people with amazing talent. It isn't a sort of, let's do market research on where the consumer is going to be in X amount of time. This is as much art as anything else. It's one of the things that makes it so exciting. It's challenging too, but it makes it really exciting. And if we get that right, if our creators get that right, we serve our audiences, and it is our primary focus. I mean, our focus around here is to be of service to our consumers, to engage them and captivate them and delight them. If we get that right, then the numbers will take care of themselves.
Since you got involved in 1993, technology has evolved a long way.
Sure.
And if anything, it seems to be evolving even faster today. We don't know where. How has it changed your business, and how do you anticipate where it's going?
Well, what's changed is our ability to create something spectacular. And I think that's what will continue to change. We have not reached the technological asymptote that was reached, frankly, long ago in motion pictures and television. And the effect of generative AI on motion pictures and television, in my opinion, is you may end up reducing the cost profile, but we already have visual effects. I'm not sure that the visual effects will be better because of generative AI, but they may be quicker and cheaper. With regard to our business, there's still a lot to be done visually, graphically in our games. So, our game NBA 2K, if you squint, it looks like real basketball, but you still have to squint a little bit. It's still animation. It's terrific animation, but we don't really have in interactive entertainment something yet that really looks like live action. But technology will get us there, probably in a shorter period of time than maybe even I expect. That doesn't mean that every game is going to look like live action. That wouldn't make any sense, creatively. But that will be another tool in our toolkit. That's generated by technology. One of the questions I'm often asked is, does generative AI mean that someone sitting at home can ask ChatGPT 14 to make a GTA competitor, code it, give me the marketing materials, and we're off to the races? I don't believe for a minute that that's going to happen. There's no evidence that tool sets allow people to win creatively. So I don't think that we're in a situation where generative AI is going to change the underlying business dynamics. To the contrary, I think these are phenomenal digital tools, and the more mundane tasks will be done more automatically, and that's the history of our business. And the creative tasks will still be done by amazing human beings. It'll be the intersection of the technology and human genius that will create hits on an ongoing basis. I'll give you an example. When I started in 1993, if we wanted to create a lawn in a video game, we had artists who had to create an individual blade of grass, or it would just look like paint. Well, today, if one of our artists wants to create a lawn, they press a button, lawn. Like, and that's before generative AI. So I think you're going to see much more of that, but that's not really going to change the character of the business. And I wish I could say it would reduce our cost. For some of our lighter offerings, it may. For example, level creation in the mobile business is probably going to become more efficient. For our big, robust releases, I think the cost reduction that we may find with technology will be swamped by the ability to do more, and we're going to want to do more, and our consumers will demand more. One of I think the mistakes that people make is to believe somehow that generative AI is going to reduce employment. You know, the history of technology is it increases employment, always increases employment. And even the paperless office, turns out offices use more paper than they ever had before. So I think that technology will allow us to do more for our consumers. That'll build the market. That will increase employment. But the exciting thing is, the ability to make something that's even more beautiful, even more compelling, even more interesting.
You mentioned marketing. How do you market a big console game like Grand Theft Auto 6?
So it probably doesn't look much different than motion picture marketing. So we'll do a lot of brand marketing for a big release. We'll use outdoor, we'll still be on television. The bulk of our spend, though, will be more directed to a consumer. It's more performance marketing. So we will use social media, and the audio-visual material against which we advertise will typically be delivered by Hulu, for example, as opposed to network television. And we don't spend money on Super Bowl ads typically. But you will see us in outdoor for our big releases. I believe in outdoor. So there's the combination of brand marketing and performance marketing. We also have a company-wide consumer database of hundreds of millions of active records. We can market directly to those consumers legally because we have a relationship with them. We've been in touch with them. So while observing privacy regulations worldwide strictly, we can reach out in many instances to consumers within our database and say, hey, this is available. We think you're going to like this.
You made a big acquisition in Zynga. How's it gone?
Well, we closed that deal in mid-22. And as the ink was drying on the contract, the mobile business actually declined for the first time in its history. So one could argue that the timing wasn't great. The truth is, though, we weren't playing for 2022. Around here, we think about the future of this company in 5, 10, 20, 30-year increments. We're trying to build a long-term, durable enterprise, an enterprise that will, of course, outlive me, but also my colleagues. And we looked at the business and we were like, we're a leader in console and PC, and we're pretty much nowhere in mobile. And there was an opportunity to bring Zynga into the fold. And it was an expensive deal at the time. It was the most expensive acquisition that had been done in the interactive entertainment businesses, eclipsed quickly by the Microsoft Activision deal. But at the time, it was a big deal, and certainly a big deal for us. At this point, as I mentioned, mobile represents 50% of our net bookings. It's a very successful business, and we have new hits. And the thing that Frank Gibeau has done in leading the team so successfully is the hardest thing to do in mobile, where hit ratios are quite low, way lower than console. And that is generate new hits. Most recently, Match Factory and Color Block Jam, which are terrific, both brought to us by our studios in Turkey, Rollick and Peak, respectively. And we're really excited about the ability to bring new hits to market and still to bring our legacy titles, Words with Friends, Empires and Puzzles, Zynga Poker, a very long list of legacy titles that we call forever franchises. And we bring those to consumers around the world. So it's been great, and I think it's going to be better in the future as well.
Is the development path for mobile substantially shorter than for console? And as a result, can you take more shots?
Yes and yes. Although we have found that, as in any entertainment business, throwing stuff against the wall and seeing what sticks never works. You still have to be really selective. But if we release 1 or 2 new intellectual properties here in console and PC at most, we can launch 3 to 10 in mobile. And the timelines are quicker, the dev costs are lower. The marketing costs, however, are quite substantial, because even with regard to a very successful mobile title, we need to acquire users, and that's an expensive proposition with a payback period that is not current. So you'll have a spend, in this quarter, and your payback will occur over, for example, 2 years before you're in profitability for that cohort. So you have to have a balance sheet to support that, which we do.
One of the biggest questions right now in all of gaming, in entertainment generally, is when does Grand Theft Auto 6 come out? Which seems to be a very carefully held secret. Why is it so carefully held as a secret?
The anticipation for that title may be the greatest anticipation I've ever seen for an entertainment property. And I've been around the block a few times, and I've been in every entertainment business there is. And we want to maintain the anticipation and the excitement. And we do have competitors who will describe their release schedule for years in advance. And we found that the better thing to do is to provide marketing materials relatively close to the release window in order to create that excitement on the one hand and balance the excitement with unmet anticipation. And we always get it exactly right, but that's what we're trying to do.